Welcome everyone, my name is Andrew Aaronworth and I'm going to show you the process that I go through to make an oil painting. In this case it's a 12 by 12 inch commission of a cockapoo named Chai. This is the finished painting just before delivery to the client. I photographed it against the bookshelf so you can get some sense of scale. I think you can see how thick the painting is and how reflective. It's shiny because I use a lot of varnish in my medium and I use a lot of medium in my paint. The result of this is that my paint is fairly viscous, and if you look carefully, you'll see how it runs down the canvas in some areas. I like the unpredictable quality of this technique, and I've been using it for years. Here's the client-provided source photo. Although I used a number of other photos of Chai and I met the dog, it was to this photo that I most often referred. So let's begin. The painting took a total of 3 days to paint, with most of the work coming in the first 2 days, as we'll see. I never draw with graphite or charcoal on the canvas, and I never project an image or grid a canvas up to enlarge a source photo. If I draw at all on the canvas, and I often don't, I always do it with a thinned down paint in a neutral color, as I did here, where you can see a sort of brownish beige color I applied directly to the gessoed canvas. Here I'm beginning to use the rough drawing as a scaffolding to lay down the first strokes of paint. For this painting I tried to establish a mid-range tonality first, before I worked down into the darkest darks or up into the lightest lights. I've extended the tonalities a bit here, and worked over a larger portion of the canvas as well. You'll notice that the area around the dog's nose in this first pass is considerably darker than it will ultimately be. I've done this because I want to create a sense of space between those parts of the dog that project forward, like the nose, and those that recede, like the eyes and the ears. Now things are beginning to progress. I've extended the paint nearly to the edge of the dog on the left side of the canvas, and I've begun to pull long strokes of contrasting tones across the canvas to indicate Chai's fur. I've also begun to use more jewel-like colors, reds and oranges, in addition to the more neutral beiges and umbers that I've been using up to this point. Here I've begun to add darker tones that push holes in the surface of Chai's fur and suggest volume and depth. I've also paid some attention to the eye and given it a bit of sparkle to suggest the animated character of the subject. Here you see her nose added, which gives the painting an area of dark to act as a foil for the lighter tones, and it also helps immensely with confirming that the location of all the major elements are in proper proportion. Essentially, I'm painting and drawing simultaneously. Now I'm repeating the same process on the right side of the canvas, constantly checking elements for proportion and scale as I go, as well as color. Here's the right eye as well as some modeling on the nose, probably most visible in the quick horizontal highlight of paint that defines the top edge of her nose and helps to give it volume. At this point, and despite the care I had taken with my proportions, the nagging feeling that something was wrong made me step back from the painting and take a good hard look at the triangle formed by the two eyes and the nose. Right about here was when I realized that the nose and the right eye were too far over to the right and needed to be shifted left. This might seem like a disaster, but I like moving elements of paintings around, and it's important for me not to get too wedded to anything in the painting until the work is finished. You never know when you'll need to sacrifice something to make a painting work, and sometimes it's the one part you're most fond of. Here's the nose and the eye shifted over, with the nose enlarged a bit as well. Surprisingly, I always find that the scale of the nose is a key indicator about the size of the dog, and paradoxically, when the nose gets a bit larger, the dog itself seems to shrink. In this case, Chai finally assumed the stature of a small dog, which is exactly what she is. I've modeled the nose a bit here and added a few other elements, but this isn't a dramatic change from the image before. By now, though, it's late. I've been at it for 8 hours or more, and it's time to call it a day and let some of the paint set up for day 2. So let's see what the second day has in store. With the major elements in place, I can begin to work towards the edge of the dog on both the left and the right, and down into the shadowed area under the chin that includes her collar. It may seem silly to include mundane details like a collar or dog tags, but I've had dogs myself, and their individual collars are an important part of what I remember about them. Part of what I'm always looking for when I paint a portrait is some way to weave in concrete and idiosyncratic details that personalize the painting without killing the work with fussy detail. Now the body of the dog is essentially done, although see later that the runny paint will become a factor before the end. I've painted in the shadows near the collar a deep violet color, and I'm beginning to lay down options for the background. You can see a series of warm colors, mainly reds, oranges, and ochres. I've decided on the red, since it makes the neutral tones of Chai's fur pop a bit, and because it adds a bit of tension to the painting. Chai is a spirited dog, and a neutral background wouldn't capture her personality at all. Here I've begun to bring the red around her fur, and if you look closely, you'll see that I'm painting into the red with the lighter color of the dog's hair at the same time as I'm bringing the red around the figure. This helps to give the portrait a sense of volume, and frankly, it's a heck of a lot of fun when it's going well. This shot is pretty much like the last one, though without the glare that you get with the painting because of all that varnish I mentioned earlier. You can also notice the attention I lavish on the details and the eyes in my portraits. At this point, the painting is finally covered, and it might look finished, but it's not. The paint is extremely runny, and over the course of the next day, we'll see subtle shifts as the paint moves down the canvas. I also went back into one or two areas that I'll point out in the next couple of images. Here you can see the whiter areas of the canvas, which are those where the paint is heaviest, have run down the surface of the painting a bit. You can see this most clearly in Chai's shoulder on the right and in the large light-colored area at the top of her head. In fact, there was a desperate moment when I feared that this section of the painting would descend like a curtain of thick runny paint and totally obscure the eye on the right. Only some deft and a bit desperate brushwork on my part to redirect the flow of the paint in its descent kept that from happening. I've also grayed out the violet colors of the shadow under her chin to better integrate this area with her head and shoulder. Here's the finished painting, in that same photograph from the beginning. Now, though, you've seen what it took to get to this state. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below or email me at info@andrewaaronworth.com. And of course, you can see more paintings at andrewaaronworth.com. Thanks for watching.